Sometimes trying to find all those machines on the network in your environment is like playing hide and seek. And we have a hide and seek story for you on today's episode of Go-Tanium Tech Talks. Welcome back to Go-Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone, and do I have a treat for you? The title of our show today is Hide and Seek with Discover Satellite. Satellite? What is that? That is something brand new, and that's what this show is all about, bringing you brand new stuff from Tanium. And I have the chief potentate Discover SME. There is nobody in the company that knows any more about Discover than this guy I'm about to introduce to you. And one interesting tidbit about this guy, he interviewed me when I came to Tanium 4 years ago. So that tells you he's been around. He knows a thing or two. Today, he's going to give us the 411 of what is Discover, number one, because we've not done a show on our most popular module yet. How can that be? We're almost at the year mark now. So we're going to catch up on what is Discover. We're going to talk about this new satellite capability and what it means to you. And as an admin, what do you need to do to set this up and get it working in your environment because you already own it? So without further ado, Jason, introduce yourself today.
Yeah, I'm Jason Morris. I have been with Tanium for several years now, but I came over here from IBM after 20 years there. I needed a change. This was a great place coming into Tanium as a startup, watching us grow and get to this point. And I had a great opportunity along the way of taking up the leadership on the technical side of one of our modules and helping build it out. And it's really exciting.
I also see a guitar there in the background, Jason. How long have you been playing guitar?
So I started, I'm going to say like 35 years ago when I was in high school. I used to play with a couple of bands. I was really big at that time in the mid to late 80s in the punk rock scene in the Dallas Fort Worth area. It was a lot of fun playing. I still like to make it out to the shows, but these days, they say old punks never die. They just stand in the back. That's kind of me these days.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Old punks never die. They just stand in the back. And it's fun to watch and see because it just keeps getting better. And that's what we're here to talk about today with Discover. Jason, we were just talking before we hit record that somehow we've never done a Discover show. Why don't you take us into the Tanium console? And for those who are, because we do have a lot of brand new people watch this show who want to find out, number one, what is Discover, but then we're going to show them the new stuff. So if you could go ahead and share your screen and just take us through a quick walkthrough of Discover and what it does.
Ashley, the key thing with Discover is it's finding the unmanaged parts of your network. So we utilize the Tanium architecture through our various profiles to determine what is not managed in the network. So our key areas are the distributed profiles. These will communicate between managed endpoints where we can find where there are devices on your network that are not managed. These could be things like printers or even systems that might be hidden on your network that are part of a shadow IT organization or just you haven't been able to manage yet. I have an interesting story that happened once where we found something utilizing this distributed methodology that we were scanning the network and we couldn't figure out where the system was. Eventually, we found it was drywalled into a wall. It was a small micro platform system that was being used to monitor the network in that area. It was kind of one of those really interesting use cases that we wouldn't have found otherwise. It just kept showing up. We have
So,
a couple.
so we're talking about discovering devices that are unmanaged, and the title of the show is Hide and Seek. I can't imagine any more hide and seek than a machine that has a network cable running through the drywall and nobody can access it.
Literally, it was hidden in every possible sense. And the investigation to find it really started with Discover. It kept showing up. No one knew what it was. We couldn't find it on any inventory. And then we traced it to the network switch it was plugged into. Someone actually physically ran down the line to find it. And they found it was actually behind a wall inside of the drywall of an office.
Wow.
crazy.
So we've got all these different types of scans here. So there's ARP and ping and
Yep.
nmap, right?
Yep. And all of these show up, just immediately if you install Tanium Discover the first time, you're going to start with a level 2 scan that will automatically be deployed to you. This in the ping capability is just an ICMP ping. It's very light on your network. It will determine what's out in your network quickly. And we're also using the time to live values to figure out whether it's a Linux or a Mac or a Windows system with a pretty good degree of accuracy. We can improve that accuracy by moving up the line. I'm going to skip the level 3 and go straight to the highest level at level 4, where we do a full nmap scan where we can determine open ports, but then have a very, very good idea of what operating system, even down to the generation of that operating system that's running. So we have
Wow.
several different areas we can do. The interesting part here, though, is this is our old technology. We've been doing this for years. The new part that we want to come into is what we can do now.
Typically, this is so we talk about centralized or decentralized, and then we've got like this API thing with the cloud, so we can inventory like VMs and things like that. Talk about those different types of scans. Just kind of enumerate each one of those for us.
Sure. So within the Discover console, I'm looking at a Tanium as a service environment right now. So you don't see the centralized scan features. They exist only in the on-premise. And these have two different capabilities. One of them is a scan that radiates out from your Tanium module server that will allow you to scan portions of the network where you may not have a Tanium client. So you can scan any network reachable from the Tanium module server. Additionally, extending that out is the cloud capability. Today, only AWS is available, but we're extending that in the new year. This will allow you to do an API call out to a cloud instance and to pull back information on running, as well as different cloud systems that may be turned off, or cloud instances, I should say, where you have that provisioned endpoint, but it's either running or not. We can pull back all the information about that endpoint into Discover, whether it has a client on it or not.
So I'm also thinking about our beginners here. Some people have never seen Discover before. Let's go show them two things. Let's show them the type of data they can get back and how to tag that data.
From the profile, we have the different data that can be pulled in, and we can show this here. This will show you at each level what data is available to you from these scans. But let's look at it after it's been collected. So when I go into the interfaces view, you'll see I have an initial breakdown. Right now, I'm just going to leave it in all, but I can go to looking at only managed, unmanaged, unmanageable. I have a breakdown based on the manufacturers as a graph, but I can also look at the individual data elements. Several are displayed just right off the bat, including the MAC address, the manufacturer, the host name, the IP address, labels, which are the tags that you can put on it, based on whatever criteria you want to define, the operating system. And I said open ports, the discovery method, and how things were seen. But we also have several different items that may include items that aren't always needing to be seen, but you can go in. All of the cloud data, in this instance, we don't pull any cloud information, so we have all of this turned off, but you can see the time an instance was last fired up, when it was created, so the launch time, the creation, the owner ID, who created it, and even the cloud tags put into the AWS instance itself. So
So
we
I
can.
remember right after I was hired in the company, I got ramped up. One of my first customer meetings in my first year was with a manufacturer, and they had paid like thousands of dollars to some external folks to come in and inventory their environment manually. And by the time they clocked out the first day, it took them weeks to do that. It was already stale the first day. And here
Yep.
you can have a fresh inventory of your whole environment before you even done checking your mail on Monday morning. I mean, it's just that fast. It's amazing.
With our different scan types, the distributed scan types specifically, we can scan your network and have a large portion of that data back within an hour. Within a day of doing scanning, we have a very good picture of all of the devices on your network, any place there's a Tanium client. Add to that the other capabilities to do scanning that with the central and the satellite that we're going to be talking about, we can have all of that at a very, very high degree of accuracy in the 90% range. So labels are a way to build different things. I'm just going to start with a create label and walk through this. We have a couple of different types. The automatic is what I'm going to concentrate. Manual is just you putting things into your own grouping. Automatic, we get to define various rules for this. We have several activities, some under the retain. Labeling under the retain, we have label, mark unmanageable, notify, and promote. These are interesting only from the perspective of label is really a grouping based on rules. Marking unmanageable means this is something we'll never put a Tanium client on, but we still want to retain an inventory of it. Notify is actually probably one of the most powerful features where we integrate with Tanium Connect to send you, through a database, through help desk communication, to your SIM, wherever you want to go, or strictly to email information on devices as we see them come up on the network, or reporting capabilities after the fact. And promote is relatively new, that we're integrating into our Tanium data services, where we're allowing the information in Discover to be shared with any other module inside of Tanium, or even external through our external APIs that can pull data out into other third-party products.
Nice. So I like that.
It's very cool. It's not heavily utilized yet, but I see this as the future of Discover. So if I go through in to create a label, I can select any of the different capabilities that we're able to see as any of the header rows here. If I do say computer ID is equal to 0, and then maybe I can do IP contains, and I'm just going to randomly put in an address that I see here, 10.8. So I know that's one of the networks that I manage. Dynamically, now I have all of the different systems within this network. I actually did that backwards. These are the managed systems. But if I create this label, I can do this as a grouping that I can keep forever, or I can send myself an alert. I can even make it anything new that happens on this network, send my SOC an email immediately, because maybe this is a protected network that we need to investigate any new devices.
Nice. So that's a really good overview. There's a whole lot more to discover. So if you're new to Tanium, if you're trialing the module, we can set up a SME with you to do a much deeper dive. But we want to spend the rest of the show talking about something new and exciting. Is this the title of the show, Hide and Seek with Discover Satellite? There's a new capability in Tanium called Satellite, and Jason's going to tell us a little bit about that and what it takes to get it set up in your environment.
To start with, Satellite is exactly what you said, Ashley. It's a capability. It's not a new shared service. It's not a new module. And it's really made possible by both using our DEC, or direct endpoint connection capability, and extending the module to take advantage of the specific items. Satellite takes what you could do centrally in the Tanium infrastructure, not an endpoint, but moves that capability to an endpoint, thus deputizing that endpoint to do what you want. Starting off with DEC, when I go into DEC, I have a new area called Satellites. Discover is the first module to take advantage of the satellite capabilities, but it won't be the last. When I create a satellite, it's as simple as coming in, defining a system that it can query. I can query this with either Filter Builder and do something more specific, or as I did, I just put in an address so I could see a list of items that fit that criteria. Linux, Macs, and Windows systems are the only ones capable. Creating the satellite then involves setting it up, and then you need to verify it. When I go in, I have selected one system for a satellite. I do a continue. And Now I have two choices. I can actually log into the endpoint and get the fingerprint of that satellite. I'm not going to do that. That is just to make sure you have full visibility into that endpoint, that you can get into it and see. I can also visually verify if I know this is where I want to go. It'll pull back the actual unique identifier that I want. And then I can save this. I'm going to go ahead and save it and then move into Discover. So once I've created something as a satellite, I've set up all of the secure communication channel needed to send any of the data back and forth between the Tanium infrastructure and that satellite. Let me highlight that, secure. It has a security certificate encrypted communication path that we've already defined. This will be used in any of the communication for Discover now, but also later for Comply with remote authenticated scan, for Impact to talk to domain controllers, for Tanium client management to do remote deployments. These are future capabilities. As I said, Discover is step one on satellite. These others will be coming out within the next several months.
So it's like we're crowdsourcing scanning the network, right? Discover's always done that, but now we're even doing it very securely, right? So nobody else can see what you've crowdsourced from that machine, so to speak, to
Exactly.
use a metaphor. All right.
Yeah. And the data here, when I go and I select a satellite, I now have all of the two satellites I had previously, plus I have the new Ubuntu one that I just selected as a possible satellite. When I select it, I have all the same capabilities you would see on a level 4 scan, because essentially this is a level 4 or a central type scan that's now taking place from the satellite. Unlike the distributed scans that scan between managed endpoints, we're going to select, as I said, all the same. So I have the NPCAP settings, I have the port settings where I can expand the default port range, but where it starts changes is in the included networks. Within a distributed, this was a selection of whether or not an endpoint was allowed to scan. Within the satellite scan, this is where it is going to actually execute a scan against. So if I put in a new network here, and I'll just go ahead and select this, and if I put in 192.168.1.024. This is a CIDR range that is going to scan all of this network from 192.168.1.0 to 254 and scan that network.
So this is how we're targeting. Yeah.
It will scan every one of those IPs. We do have a limitation up to 4,096 addresses in any single profile. That may change in the future. That's our starting point as we do this first release. So right now I have these two networks selected. Save it. When we create it, this is going to create a profile that's going to get sent to the endpoint. This will be executed as part of the Tanium CX components, the backend components inside of that module, and it'll wake up every hour. It will scan all of that network range and it'll pull the data in. This is where we get a slight difference in our data of what we can collect from a satellite versus a distributed scan.
Yeah, that was my next question, because I was curious, how does this work exactly? So is this client in that network that we're scanning, or is it outside that network and reaching across the magic network wall somewhere to outside the subnet to scan it?
It can be either. And there's a couple of different use cases for either scenario as well. So I'm going to just change this to found by satellite as my filter criteria in the interfaces. So I can see in this scan, I have 31 systems that were found. And in this case, they're all going to have MAC addresses. The reason that they will is exactly what you just mentioned, Ashley. We're within the same network, scanning in this case. This is one of the use cases where you could deploy a satellite scan within a network and only deploy the Discover tools to that one endpoint, and then allow it to scan the network that it also participates in. That would limit your tools pushes. Sometimes the driver for NPCAP is something that you may not want to push out to all systems, or all Windows systems actually, but you could limit where you put the tools and what goes on, but still have the same visibility to that network. You can also scan outside of it. And this is the place where data changes. If I scan outside of the network and I have to be routed, if I go through a gateway of some type, I will not be able to retrieve the MAC address. This means I also won't know the manufacturer of the device. And those are the two items that are part of a satellite scan, also a centralized scan that you may not be able to rely on in those cases. But you'll still have the IP address, the host name, if DNS is working properly, and all of the scan data is still just as accurate.
So this is a big extended reach, which really, as we were talking about earlier, helps our TaaS customers, our Tanium as a Service cloud hosted instance, because they don't have an on-prem module server, which is kind of the new norm now that you're hosting this in the cloud. But you'll need these satellites to be able to scan places that you couldn't, you wouldn't do a scan from a cloud server. So.
Exactly. So it was kind of sad. We released the central scan capability almost within the same week as Tanium as a Service, and our SaaS capability kind of went live. So we introduced one capability at the same time as you couldn't take advantage of it. So this is part of what's excited me about satellite is we've restored that capability to every customer that we have. And we've even extended it in a way that everyone can take advantage of a satellite. I mentioned to you before we started how this opens up mergers and acquisitions. I think that's one of the most exciting use cases personally of you have a new acquisition. You've just obtained this new company, but you don't know really the layout of it or what's going on. You could deploy one client within that network and utilizing Tanium satellite, then turn around and be able to scan every portion of the network. You have to know the network addresses, of course, but you could start scanning that network and understand what's on it, what the capabilities are, where you're going to need to do your deployments, what the operating system mixes are. Some of these things you should know from inventory, but you'll have definite proof from what's discovered on it, and it'll be very much up to date and truthful, and that gives you a thing to compare against your inventory as well, not just blindly go in with a spreadsheet.
Unfortunately, we're about out of time, and that is a fantastic use case. Over and over, M&A comes up, mergers and acquisitions. So this is a show for admins. I don't want to forget about what are the requirements. So what version, I'm sure all this is available at docs.tanium.com, but what versions, is there a platform minimum version, or, what do I have to do to get Discover and Satellite going in my environment?
In general, there is not a platform minimum version, but we've only really worked with 7.3, 7.4, and 7.5 platforms. I highly recommend being at 7.5 for the most capable information. It's faster, it's better, it's more reliable, but it doesn't really affect Discover Satellite. The Direct Connect or Direct Endpoint Connect, or DEC, as I commonly refer to it, needs to be at the 2.1 version. We only have one 2.1 released version, so anything there and beyond will give you the capabilities to define a satellite. And Discover or 4.5. And again, there's only one 4.5 release version. It happens to be .140, 4.5.140 or beyond. All versions from now on will have this capability. And one of the key items is it will be easy to configure. You saw me step through those steps. If you don't see satellite as a function when you try to create a profile, probably you don't have satellites configured, or you're at a older version.
Okay, so the next couple things I want to think about is how do you see this playing out? Just kind of all up, kind of zooming out for a minute. How do you see this playing out in kind of daily use? A lot of people have been Tanium customers for years. This is one of the first modules they bought. How do you see this changing the way they use Discover today on a daily basis?
It's just extending that capability as a daily use case. it's not going to change how you use Discover. It's just going to give you more visibility to more portions of the network that you've never had before. Think about another use case where I have dual homed or multi-home systems. That meaning that system has multiple network adapters that plug into multiple different networks. Sometimes those secondary networks may be completely private. They may not even be directly routable back to the Tanium server, so they've never been scanned. The distributed only utilizes the main network adapter. Now you could scan those networks utilizing a satellite scan. You can even do it efficiently with only one system scanning it versus multiple, which would have been the case before, and pull back that data. That may be one of the key areas that people just get more data. In terms of the console and utilizing it, you're going to go through the same steps, the same labeling, the same notification, so you can set alerts and set it and forget it till something interesting happens, and then log on to the console to go explore that section of the network.
And really, where I see this too happening for a lot of people is, we've always known that there are just places in the network we couldn't reach. But we've also always known that when we bring Tanium Discover in, we find 10 to 20% of the environment that was unknown to begin with. So we're going to extend that even more to find more reach, more devices that are unmanaged in the environment. So, Jason, thank you for being a guest on Go-Tanium Tech Talks today. And people can go to docs.tanium.com to check out how to implement this. They can go to kb.tanium.com to see those release notes for Discover and see where those capabilities are documented. And we also have a community article, bit.ly, use a lot of those links, /discosat, DISCOSAT, discosat, right? So that's your Discovery Satellite community article that'll get you there, where we can give some more information that you can share with other folks on your team. So some takeaways here today. So number one, we've always said, not us, really, the whole industry has always said, you can't secure what you can't see. So now you can see even more. You can scan every corner of the network. You can bring more of those machines under the management. And now for TaaS users, it's really good news that you can have that centralized scan capability from these machines that are on-prem. So go check out the community article. And also, this show is the next one following Converge. We had a great time at Converge last week here. When we're recording this is the following week anyway. And you can go check out a podcast. If you missed Converge, there's two things that you can do. Number one, you can go to the recap podcast. So if you go to bit.ly Go-Tanium Show, this link on the screen here, that'll take you over to Doug's podcast for Go-Tanium Tech Stories, where Doug and Oliver and I just dropped a new episode where we discussed kind of our takeaways from Converge all up. It was a fantastic discussion. I'd ask you to check that out. But then also, you can actually go to Converge now and stream it on demand. Even if you didn't sign up for the event originally, it's free. You can go sign up, and when you get there, you go to bit.ly/Tanium Converge. You're going to go see the same keynotes, breakouts, customer stories, all that goodness from Converge. And when you get there, you'll go to this page, bit.ly/Tanium Converge. You hit the Get Access button. If you were already registered for Converge, it'll ask you to kind of step through your registration details again. But then you just next through that a couple times, and then you actually get in to stream all the on-demand content. If you've never signed up for Converge, you can go ahead and hit Get Access, fill out a request as a new person, and be able to get in and stream all that content. So there's a ton of great news and announcements, and really some just fantastic industry specialist interviews that even as a Tanium admin, I think you would find really interesting. So check out the podcast for the recap. Check out the streaming, and also with this on-demand content, you can even go see each one of the Tanium solution area PMs as they talk about what's coming next on the roadmap. That is really some gold right there. You want to make sure to check that out. So Jason, once again, thank you for being our guest today on Hide and Seek with Tanium Discover. And until next time, go Tanium.